Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take on Market Rebellion. And as we get into Tuesday, it's an interesting lead that we got in out of Monday because when we go back to Monday, markets were down. They had some pretty good pressure on them. The Dow was down about 250 points, S&P down about 25 points. But again, that dislocation in the NASDAQ, and the NASDAQ actually kind of holding on to the green while the others were pushing pretty deep into the red. Well, by midday, started to move around a little bit. The Dow actually turned back up into positive territory, so a nice rebound there. Still did close down about 0.5%, but a pretty nice rebound off of those lows. And the S&P finished closer to flat. Meanwhile, the NASDAQ continued those gains that it had early in the green and finished even stronger. So a very, very interesting market once again, and it's driven by a couple of different sectors, quite honestly, right now. And we're seeing how that's breaking down. I'll break that down for you in 1 second. But volatility, let's just talk about this for a second. Now, we've talked about volatility coming down, the movement in the markets themselves contracting more and more, and we continue to see that, including today. But when we see that contraction, that volatility is going to start coming down in a hurry, which is exactly what it has been doing. And we had that range we talked about, 30 to 35, about a week or so ago. And now we've broken through that 30 levels just last week. So here we are once again going a little bit lower. Last night, closing around 27.5 in terms of the volatility index. So underneath 30, and it looks like the markets, at least for now, are wanting to stay under those levels when you consider what the movement really looks like intraday and how much movement we're seeing within that intraday. And we've had some violent moves here and there, but in a much, much more contracted range. Now, we talked about what was really powering the markets on both the positive and the negative side. Well, on the negative side yesterday, it was the financials. That has been a continued theme. The financials every once in a while will lead to the upside, and we've had a couple of days, even back-to-back days, where we've watched financials actually start to move, and you start to scratch your head and say, well, maybe. Well, no. The financials really just have so much difficulty right now holding on to any gains, and we've talked about this particular chart in Wells Fargo that Brian McCormick over at Market Rebellion is talking about a lot, and it's really intriguing to take a look. So I would encourage you, just pull up about a 6 month, maybe even a 1 year, but then even contract it down a little bit and see where Wells Fargo is today versus where it was when the markets were on their March lows. And you're going to probably scratch your head just a little bit. So energy also under some pressure. Energy down about 2% yesterday. Financials down about 2%. But you know what was not down 2%? Take a look over at the NASDAQ, and everybody always wants to point to the Power 5, or maybe even just put it all on tech. Now, there's no question about it. Tech, very nice day yesterday. You had names like Zoom, the usual suspects of Apple and Microsoft, throw in Activision, and you have a pretty nice grouping of stocks that are stay-at-home stocks and those that have really been performing and really outperforming, quite honestly, for a while. But don't forget about these biotech stocks. When you look yesterday and you see what really was actually leading in terms of a positive side of the markets, it was the pharmaceuticals, and it was definitely, when you look at the biotech names, across the board. Moderna was up 13% yesterday. Regeneron up a couple of percent. Gilead up 4%. Seattle Genetics up about 2%. You got Vertex. You got Biogen. Biogen up 4.5% yesterday. Vertex up 5%. These are pretty outrageously strong moves. Matter of fact, the biotech index that I was pulling up, the XBI, that was up nearly 5% yesterday. So that gives you a real good sense of how much the NASDAQ is not just technology obviously dominant, but let's throw in a lot of these various biotech names as well, because they certainly have been very, very strong and powering the markets themselves in a nice move. And we all know how much is going on, obviously, with the pandemic, how much is going on in terms of some of the breakthroughs that some are at least starting to feel like they're getting closer and closer to, and a lot of just movement that we are seeing there in a very positive way. And it's not just Apple and Facebook and Microsoft, but you're getting a big contribution from other areas of the markets as well. Well, today, things are looking pretty good. I was out there working out long before the opening bell, and markets are up. Then they're actually going into triple digits, and then they're going a little bit stronger to getting up to about 150 plus points, somewhere in that sort of a range. Matter of fact, we opened up strong. We gave up a little bit, but we opened up strong, over 100 points early on in terms of the Dow. 30 minutes into trade, you take a look and you just sort of scratch your head. I look and the Dow was flat. S&P was actually in negative territory, down about 0.25%. And the NASDAQ had dropped 100 points already off of where it had started, or at least the highs of the session in the first 30 minutes of the day. We're only 1 hour into the day today. I'm a little bit early, but 1 hour into the trading session today, I'll tell you exactly what I'm looking at right now. The Dow is up a little. It's up about 0.25%, 50 points. NASDAQ, negative territory. S&P, flat, negative territory. Both of them very close to flat, but they're both red right now. But boy, it just tells you a lot about some of the movement. Now, it's not that violent movement we've been seeing. I talked about the contraction in the moves, and that's why when you look at the volatility right now, where is it? It's actually down a little bit more. It's 27.25. So we're looking at volatility that's well underneath that 2% moves. Right now, we don't have anything moving more than 0.2% in any of the three major indexes. So that's a statement in and of itself of just how tight things really are. Now, the industrials are really, when you look at what's sort of powering at least the Dow, well, the Dow has been in some of this positive territory and moving up 100 points. It is Dow, it's Boeing, it's United Health, it's Cisco, it's Walmart. It's a lot of those kind of names moving to the upside. Throw in Home Depot, McDonald's, Apple. Those are the names that are sort of powering to the upside right now. But you want to look to the downside. We talked about some of the sectors that are not working, have not been working. Financials. Look at what's really pulling on the Dow right now to the downside. It's Goldman Sachs, it's American Express, it's those kinds of names that just have been having such a difficult time finding footing, or at least finding any sustained moves. They can move for a day or two to the upside, but that sustained move to the upside, we just aren't seeing it there. Now, like I say, volatility continues to be fairly low. Volumes yesterday, extremely low relative to what we'd seen the previous day and what we've seen already in the month of May. It's a very small set so far of numbers, but it's just not seeing the kind of volumes that we were seeing last month for sure, or even year to date. We're falling far short of that. So an interesting thing that we're seeing there is, when will we start to see this volume start to pick up once again? Now, we always want to talk about some unusual option activity that we're seeing. Roku. Now, understand, there are so many names out there that are just off the charts and have exploded to the upside in this rebound that we've seen in the marketplace. We've talked about names like Zoom. We've talked about Twilio. We've talked about a lot of these names that have just skyrocketed of late. And thank goodness we've had the fortune of seeing a lot of unusual option activity leading into some of these moves to the upside and rolling and rolling and rolling. And we've seen that time and time again. Datadog's the most recent one. Datadog just hit the other day. That stock made an absolutely huge run into their earnings, post earnings, and this move to the upside's crazy. They're buying in there again today, but that's not what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on Roku, and here's what I'm looking at. Here's a stock that's trading about $132. The options that they're buying, of course, we talk about how short-term all of the options are. Well, these are May expiring options. That's Friday. So these are very short in duration, but stock trading about 132. What are they buying? The May 140s. It is not ridiculous anymore. In the past, I would have said, wow, that's going to be a pretty hefty move. You got to go about $8. Doesn't mean it's going to happen necessarily, but these days, when we've been watching names like Datadog, where they're buying options way up, you look at Zoom, you're seeing options way up from where the stock's presently trading. And yet it's amazing how much fuel there is in the tank for some of these names to move to the upside. Roku, the most recent one in terms of hitting. Now, will this produce? Who knows? But we had 7,000 of those May 140 calls were bought. They started at about $1.50. They moved up to $2. So these are not inexpensive. This is a fairly large dollar trade when you consider 7,000 trading for that kind of dollars. That's a pretty impressive size trade as well. Doesn't mean they're going to be right. Always have to put that qualifier on there, but it's always interesting to see this unusual option activity that we see each and every day. This really stuck out for me. This was the first option of the unusual options of the day to actually hit. And this hit right out of the gates, right at the very beginning of the day. And we've had got about 5 or 6 unusual option activities in that first half hour, 45 minutes or so before we started this. Folks, have a great day at trading. Understand what's going on in the derivatives markets. That's what's so important. That's where the growth is. I talk about it every single day because I'm passionate about this. We see these options. We understand what it means in terms of the short term and the long term duration, what all these various Greeks really mean when you're talking about theta and gamma and delta and all the rest of this. It's not as complicated as it sounds, but you do have to have much more understanding. We have great educators here at Market Rebellion. That's what we're all about, trying to help people to get into a position to have the possibility, the opportunity for success, not guaranteeing anything, but giving yourself that much more so you have that opportunity. That's what we're aiming for. Folks, have a great day of trading.